Encryption keeps millions of people across the world safe, and it's doing that every day.
Millions of Ukrainians have downloaded end-to-end encrypted apps to message loved ones and share their stories with the world.
Safety is the most important thing for Ukrainians.
Encryption is playing a key role in keeping women safe when their reproductive rights are being eroded.
Encryption is safety.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next panel on Global Encryption Day. This panel is on navigating content moderation in a world embracing encryption. My name is Greg Nojheim. I'm with the Center for Democracy and Technology in Washington, D.C., and I sit on the steering committee of the Global Encryption Coalition. I'd like to thank Tech Policy Press for being the media partner of Global Encryption Day this year, and also to thank ISOC for its work in logistics for this event. Before we get to the panel, some housekeeping notes. We're hosting this summit on Zoom events, and this is a webinar. Everyone who is attending today will not be on camera and will not be able to speak as part of the sessions, except of course the speakers. The chat function is available. It'll be on the right side of your screen. And please put comments in the chat or in the Q&A. It'll be monitored by my colleague, Elizabeth Seeger, who will identify your questions to us for response. This summit will be presented in English, and there will be simultaneous translation in French and Spanish. Please choose the language you prefer by clicking on the globe icon below your screen. Finally, closed captions are also available in English, Spanish, and French. Please select your preferred language in the closed caption icon. Now for the panel. Increasingly, governments around the world are considering regulatory schemes that would obligate providers of communication services to moderate the content that they carry. These governments, and they include the UK, the EU, Australia, the United States, and many others, are considering or have enacted proposals that require providers to detect, block, take down, or report communications content. And they're putting these regulations in place to counter child sexual abuse, fight terrorism, disrupt the illegal trade in drugs, or to throttle content that is otherwise deemed unwanted or merely harmful. These regulatory schemes are being applied not just to public social media platforms, but to platforms that are encrypted end-to-end. The essence of end-to-end encryption is that only the sender and the intended recipients of a communication can read it. Since the provider is neither sender nor intended recipient, they're just an intermediary, the provider too cannot understand the content being conveyed on a system that's encrypted end-to-end. This raises a very basic question. If you can't read it, how are you supposed to detect it, or block it, or report it? Some very smart people are thinking about this very problem, and we've gathered some of them to discuss it with you on our panel today. Dhanaraj Thakur is Research Director at the Center for Democracy and Technology, where he leads research that advances human rights and civil liberties online. His work has spanned the range of technology problems over the last 15 years, including more recently, content moderation on end-to-end services, automated content moderation, and misinformation and disinformation in elections. Dhanraj, welcome to the panel. We also have Iria Puyusa. Iria is a senior researcher at DFR Labs, at the DFR Lab Democracy and Technology Initiative. Her research focuses on critical internet-related topics, including cyber sovereignty, the risks of internet fragmentation, state surveillance, and intrusive data capture. She recently authored an in-depth report on end-to-end encrypted messaging apps. Iria, welcome to the panel. Rihanna Pfefferkorn is a research scholar at the Stanford Internet Observatory and a former summer intern at CDT, which is, I think, her real claim to fame. Rihanna is a lawyer by training. Her research focuses on encryption policy, cybersecurity, government surveillance, and online trust and safety. And finally, Calvin Magori is a lecturer at the Harare Institute of Technology in Harare. That's in Zimbabwe, it's the capital. And he's in the Information Assurance Department. He also sits on the board of directors of the Zimbabwe Child Online Safety. He has a passion for cybersecurity, and indeed, he is a certified ethical hacker, not the other kind. Calvin, I see you're on. Iria, would you show up on the camera, please? Thank you. And I've asked the panelists to be brief, so we have lots of time for questions at the end. I'm going to play the evil but smiling timekeeper. If a question occurs to you while a person is speaking, and before we turn to questions, please put the question in the Q&A or in the chat. We'll be watching them so we can flag questions to the panel. I'd like to turn first to Dhanraj. Dhanraj, would you tell folks a little more about the work the CDT research team has done and is doing on encryption?
Great. Thank you, Greg. And thank you to the Global Encryption Coalition and their partners for organizing today's event. So to get to your question, Greg, let me start by saying and kind of reminding and building on that, great video we saw at the start, that there are several important benefits to encryption and end-to-end encrypted communication services, namely privacy and security. And these are important, for consumer protection, e-commerce, trust in the economy, journalism, the free press. They're crucial links between privacy and freedom of expression. The problem that we face is that there's, as Greg, as you mentioned, that there are multiple threats to undermine encryption and end-to-end encryption, and specifically that overlook all these benefits. And narratives from a lot of these initiatives suggest that we need to break end-to-end encryption to moderate content, protect users. This is inaccurate, and part of our research goal is to build evidence to highlight this inaccuracy and point to alternatives, right? So 2 years ago, in fact, we published a report, and thanks to Elizabeth Seeger for sharing the link in the chat. It's called Outside Looking In, Approaches to Content Moderation in End-to-End Encrypted Systems, that examine existing and proposed methods to assess content on end-to-end encrypted messaging services, pointing out which of these approaches would support privacy and the privacy and security guarantees of end-to-end encryption, and which would violate them. So that supports this goal that I mentioned earlier of pointing to alternatives to assess content on these kinds of services.
Thanks, Dhanraj. It does strike me that policymakers, they tend to think that unwanted content like child sexual abuse material or terrorism information, that it has to be discovered and moderated by the platform that carries it. But one of your studies, I understand, that's about to be published, suggests that teenagers, for example, have their own ways of dealing with unwanted content. What are you finding in this work? And tell us a little bit about the study you're conducting.
Sure, yeah, thanks for raising that. And it does this idea of trying to understand what are user perspectives and how they deal with unwanted content, and specifically teenagers, follows from our previous work, but in fact, some of the work by the panelists represented here today. The report that you mentioned, Greg, is called More Tools, More Control, Lessons from Young Users on Handling Unwanted Messages Online. And it's going to be released next month. It's written by Dr. Michal Luria, who's a research fellow at CDT, and Dr. Carl Scott, who's at the University of Michigan. So let me just briefly highlight a few of the findings here to give you a sense of what direction this report is going to go. So the online context is, follows from this broader issue of trying to address the kind of valid concern on exposure of children and young people to unwanted content online. And the underlying problem that you see with a lot of the policy responses is that it views young people as passive participants of this kind of content. Participants that need almost 24/7 parental or platform supervision online. And so we try to interrogate that kind of assumption by actually asking young users, what do they do when it comes to unwanted messages, specifically on messaging apps, because messaging is particularly popular with young people. By messaging, I mean things like WhatsApp, iMessage, Instagram DMs, Snapchat DMs, and so on. And so we conducted a qualitative study using what's called video-based diary entries from participants, as well as interviews. And so there are a couple of things of that stood out here. And I'll mention a few, and we can talk more later on if there's time in the Q&A. One is that, yes, there are lots of unwanted messages, but they're not equally distributed among participants. Some participants are more likely to receive them on a regular basis. And some of them actually are targeted at certain demographics, which I think is an interesting data point, requires more research. So for example, one thing that we found is that young African-American boys are more likely to be receiving these kinds of unwanted messages. But this unequal distribution follows from a couple of things. One is the degree to which participants engage in strategies to minimize their exposure to this kind of content. And that could include setting their accounts to private, primarily keeping their interaction to close circles, or limiting the extent to which they actually participate online on the network generally, which unfortunately can be linked to the problem around chilling effects. There's also a design feature within platforms. So several participants mentioned how the platforms are set up in such a way that facilitate the receiving of unwanted messages, particularly on Twitter, Discord, or TikTok, because of the way they allow strangers or people that are not part of a participant's network to be able to DM them. That said, many of the participants are aware of bad actors online, and they actively try to assess risk and strategize how to handle unwanted messages. And they do that in different ways, particularly in terms of the escalation of problems. So they would regularly assess these problems and might escalate them to, and report them to friends and family when they think it makes sense. But there's an interesting quote here I want to highlight about the perception of this problem. One participant said, quote, "I feel like people vastly overestimate how many unwanted messages we get on platforms. The risk and dangers of social media are so emphatically spread by teachers and parents. It's an active risk I take, and I feel comfortable with it, given the tools available." That discussion among several participants about the tools available and tools that they'd like to see is really where we wanted to point to, particularly for our industry partners, in terms of what could be done to improve the agency of young people online to deal with unwanted content. That include, for example, dealing with providing the ability to delete, block, or report content, enabling giving users more friction or speed bump in their interaction, particularly with strangers or unknown profiles. And the last thing I'll say is providing more transparency in reporting. So user reporting is something that I know some of the other panelists are going to talk about. But many of the participants, the young people, said that having transparency and understanding to what happens after a case is reported and allowing users to track the outcome of that reporting could be very helpful in supporting the way they want to protect themselves online. Thanks. So let me pause there, Graham. We can come back later.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think we're going to hear more about user reporting, and if we don't, and maybe even if we do, I'm going to circle back to you, Dhanaraj. Iria, tell us about the report that you recently completed on understanding Telegram, WeChat, and I think WhatsApp in the United States. What did you find overall? And what did you find that distinguished the messaging services that are encrypted from those that are not?
Thank you, Greg. In this investigation we run, we were trying to understand users in the way not only focus on harms, but also trying to see how people use these platforms. That was our initial goals. It was related with that, how people are using. And I want to emphasize, most of the users we found is positive, sharing information, looking for reliable sources, sharing that sources with other people in the community. Is a lot of dynamics and interactions around community building and sharing information. So I want to start to emphasize that it's not like these apps are a horrible place in which only harmful content is spread. It's mostly about communities, groups getting together and sharing resources, sharing support, finding ways to share information. Say that we did a landscape of more than 40 apps, messaging apps available in the United States people use here. But we focus on these three: WhatsApp, Telegram, and WeChat, because they are pretty distinctive in their technical features and in their policies too. We found WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted. They had a so extensive policy about what kind of content and behavior is not allowed with in those platforms. While Telegram is encryption is optional. You can have encrypted chats in Telegram, but most of the interaction we were analyzing occurs in public channels which are not encrypted. And we've working with WeChat, which is not encrypted at all. WeChat is used mostly by Chinese diaspora here in the United States. It's a Chinese platform, and they had extensive restriction in the kind of content that can be shared in that platform. And also within their policies, they include continuous monitoring of the content shared in the platform in order to enforce those policies. So it's more restricted than any other messaging ad available in the market. While Telegram is kind of loose in their policies, they restrict some things like spam, terrorism, very few other things. They don't do a continuous monitoring like WhatsApp does or WeChat does.
Let's zero in on the encrypted ones. As I said at the outset, if you're a provider of an encrypted service, you can't understand what people are saying on your service. If it's end-to-end encrypted. It's private even as to you. So if you can't read it, how do you moderate it when you're under one of these mandates that says you're not meant to carry child sexual abuse material? What do providers do? What techniques do they employ?
Well, in the case of WhatsApp, what is available for them, for the platform to kind of detect whether the users are infringing the terrorist user and sharing something that's banned from the platform, is user reporting. That's the first. You were right. We are going to talk a lot about user reporting. That is the most obvious, the most widely available mechanism for detecting content which is unwanted in the platform or is violate the terrorist users. They also had the ability to use some metadata analysis applied to a specific sort of contents. In the case of WhatsApp, they used a technique they call behavioral analysis. In some way, it's subset of metadata analysis, but is more about the behavior of the user. And in some case, they also had a way to do that in Facebook and Facebook Messenger. So it's across all the meta platform that use this behavioral technique. A user reporting is kind of the most obvious one. User receives something they don't want to see, and they report to the platform, and the platform can enforce the policy by banning the user or any other or sanctions. And at the beginning, the first thing is that the user won't receive more messages from that particular account or number. That's the first available mechanism. In the case of metadata analysis, they are particularly, they use that for spam, and they use that for children's sexual abuse material to try to find in their metadata clues, signals that people are sharing that unwanted content. And in case something is flagged by the automatic system, a human reviewer enter in the equation to see what is the content and whether it is really an unallowed for content or content the platform doesn't allow circulated in their messages. So it's kind of semi-automatic, so had an automatic section and then a human review in the words. And that it doesn't resolve all the problems, but is helpful. It provides a better space for people to interact with their platforms.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back with you on the human review, because I don't get how you can do that in an encrypted environment. But let me circle back to you on that question later. But I want to get to Rihanna real quick. Rihanna, ERIE has identified the tools that a provider of an encrypted service could use. Which ones work? What are the effective ones? What did you find from your studies on this?
Thanks, Craig. So I published research in the Journal of Online Trust and Safety early last year that explored what I refer to as content oblivious trust and safety techniques and contrasted those with what I call content dependent techniques. So an example of a content dependent technique would be something like automated scanning, including client-side scanning, or having human moderators going through the posts on a service, for example, techniques where the platform has to have at-will programmatic ability to access and analyze the contents of messages or other files on the platform. Content oblivious techniques, by contrast, are things like metadata analysis, analysis of behavioral signals, things that do not depend upon access to the contents of messages and files in order for that technique to work. Another thing that I would include under that would actually be user reporting, which even within end-to-end encrypted environments, I consider to be content oblivious, because there, the way that content is coming to the platform provider's attention is not because they could find it on their own programmatically. It is only because a user surfaced it to them, or perhaps, at least for unencrypted environments, somebody off platform could potentially send in an email about a post, for example, that they saw on a non-encrypted public-facing platform. So in doing the survey research into these techniques, I polled online service providers. The sample for my survey includes both end-to-end encrypted messaging apps, as well as other non-end-to-end encrypted types of online services, primarily user-generated content-driven services. And I asked them which trust and safety techniques they use. I pulled them about 12 different categories of abusive content and asked which techniques do they use to detect each of those different types of content. And we're talking about things here ranging from, spam to hate speech to mis and disinformation, child safety offenses, and so on. And all of the providers in the sample said that they use some combination of both content oblivious and content dependent techniques, which I think in itself was an important finding, because it rebuts a common myth that I've heard from governments in particular, which is that trust and safety requires the ability to do content analysis at will, that trust and safety is literally impossible in encrypted environments, basically. That's false, and these findings help to demonstrate that. The survey also asked the participants which of three techniques, automated content scanning, which is content dependent, as well as metadata analysis and user reporting, which are content oblivious, which of those did they find to be the most useful, to your question, for detecting each of the 12 types of abusive content that I was asking about? And this is what I think was the most interesting finding from the research, which is that for almost every category, a content oblivious technique was deemed to be as or more useful for detecting abuse than a content dependent technique. And specifically, user reporting almost across the board was deemed to be the most useful means of detecting abuse out of those three across most categories of abuse, with the only exception being child sex abuse imagery, where automated scanning was still deemed to be the most useful. And what these findings indicate, I think, is that end-to-end encryption services should really be investing in making robust user reporting flows, ideally ones that expose as little information about the conversation as possible apart from the abusive incident. So this is something that, for example, Messenger has employed now that you're able to turn on end-to-end encryption by default in Messenger. And that's always been an option to have it there at the user's option. It's important that there be means for users to still continue to ensure that they have their own means of keeping themselves safe on the platform, as we've been hearing from the other panelists. And nevertheless, even though the survey found that so many of these providers were saying that they thought that user reporting was the most useful means to detect so many various different types of abusive content online, I also found that a lot of them don't have robust user reporting flows that allow users to report each of those types of things that the providers themselves are saying are so useful to have user reporting to find. So user reporting, I think, kind of not necessarily low-hanging fruit given the complexities of designing UI and UX flows, especially for different age groups, but nevertheless, something that would help to empower users in their online interactions. Another content oblivious technique would be metadata analysis. This didn't really get ranked as being particularly useful for very many categories in my findings. That said, this was a couple of years ago. I think AI-driven analysis may provide a leg up there, so I don't know if the results would be the same today. But nevertheless, I think it's important to recognize that metadata analysis on its own also has privacy trade-offs. If you're a service that wants to rely heavily on metadata analysis to try to detect abusive behavior or abusive users or abusive content, the ABCs, according to Camille Francois, formerly of Graphica, the service needs to collect all of those signals and collect all of that metadata and do enough analysis to be able to make that kind of approach worthwhile. And there are plenty of services, especially end-to-end encrypted services, that choose to collect very minimal data about their users as part of their commitment to user privacy. So I think as with basically anything, when we're talking about trust and safety, it can be trade-offs all the way down. But I think that the survey findings really augment and I guess help complement the findings that we've been hearing from our other panelists from the terrific work coming out of CDT and out of DFR Lab.
Thank you, Rihanna. Now, before we go to Kelvin, I just want to remind folks that we're going to wrap up here at 10 minutes until the hour. That means we have 20 minutes left. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. Do it now because we want to get them in front of the panel. Kelvin, welcome to the panel, and thank you for joining us. It seems that sometimes the Global South is underrepresented in discussions about content moderation and encryption. And so we're really glad that you could join us because you've studied content moderation in Zimbabwe. Tell us about the work that you've done and what you've found.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Craig. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I did a study on the trends and challenges for the moderation of end-to-end encrypted platforms in Zimbabwe, where we are saying that in as much as end-to-end encrypted platforms about freedom, however, there are some challenges that are being posed like spread of misinformation, inappropriate content, disinformation, etc. So how the government and other key stakeholders like the regulators, which are MNO, the mobile network operators, are regulating these issues are key. So from this study, I I discovered Zimbabwe, just like the rest of the world, is not spared from misinformation and hate speech. Yeah, but another thing that I discovered from this study was revenge pornography is actually prevalent here in Zimbabwe. So I actually discovered a lot of things, and also on the security, like most of the people, they didn't know of this other platform, that is called WhatsApp GP, which compromised the security of the authentic WhatsApp. Although the authentic WhatsApp owners, they try by all means to mitigate to stop users of this other platform called WhatsApp GP, but the problem is still there. But the challenge now is we know that the original WhatsApp is found on Google Play Store, but there's this other now WhatsApp platform called GB WhatsApp, which is not found on the authentic Google Play Store. So when these two platforms now communicate together now, it means now the security of the original WhatsApp is compromised, because we don't know who is owning this other platform, which is WhatsApp GB. So I actually discovered a lot of things from this research. Like I said, that in Zimbabwe, we recently had the Cybersecurity and Data Protection Act just to be compliant or to catch up with the rest of the world. So there are quite a number of issues now that how now are we going to, for evidence to be admissible in the court of law now, we have to come up with some frameworks or some standard operating procedures to take to court, because digital evidence is actually difficult to handle. So we need some frameworks like, okay, maybe let me pose a good example. WhatsApp introduced a feature of disappearing messages, and according to the new Cybersecurity and Data Protection Act in Zimbabwe, sending inappropriate content or maybe intimidating somebody is now a crime. But what's happening now is now having a new feature of disappearing messages. So how is that evidence going to be used in the court of law when the other end no longer have the messages? So for Zimbabwe now, we actually need some framework for digital forensics, a framework for evidence to be admissible in the court of law. Otherwise, it will be very, very much difficult to take somebody to court. So those are some of the things or findings that I got from this research.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So when it comes to end-to-end encryption and moderating content, what are some of the things that you're recommending that policymakers do?
Okay. It's now, we now have to strike a balance now between security and privacy. Like in security, we know the goals of security of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, but I believe those goals have now evolved. We now have non-repudiation, where we are saying that a sender should not deny have sent a message, because we are saying that we need to take someone to court. So a sender should not deny having sent a message, but now we need to strike a balance now between performance now and what in security. Because when we implement now the non-repudiation feature on our communication platforms, it means we now have probably two encryption algorithms like for to achieve non-repudiation we are now using public key cryptography. So performance of the communication platforms will be compromised. But we need to have evidence admitted in the also in the court of law. At the same time, we need their performance not to be compromised, and also we need to keep this issue of anonymity. Where we are saying that people power, we need their privacy to the people. So how we have to strike a balance between the two now is an issue now. with our policymakers.
I have to admit that I never heard of GB WhatsApp. Is there an interoperability issue between GB WhatsApp and real WhatsApp? In other words, can they interoperate? And if they do interoperate, what's the consequence for encryption?
Yeah, there is an interoperability. Yeah, like I said, the authentic WhatsApp is found on the Google Play Store, but GB is not found on the Google Play Store. Yet these two platforms are communicating. With the authentic WhatsApp, you can actually moderate content, but with this GB WhatsApp, you can't moderate content. You can actually forward a lot of information. Probably it will be false information to a lot of people. So there's an interoperability between these two platforms. So security is compromised now because if these two platforms are communicating together and we don't know the owners of GB WhatsApp, it means messages are going to WhatsApp GB servers. And in future, people are not talking about quantum cryptography, where we are saying store now and decrypt later. Probably in the near future, we'll have a lot of information that is coming from GB WhatsApp, which we thought that it was secure.
I want to turn back to Iria. I warned you I'd be coming back to you, Iria. When it comes to content moderation using metadata analysis, you had indicated that there, after the initial analysis, there'd be a human review. What's the human reviewing if the message is encrypted end to end? What does that review constitute?
In the case of user reporting, when people report to the platform a message, a content, the platform receive the content, so it can be assessed. In the case, it's no breaking encryption because it's one of the ends, one user sharing that content with a new recipient. In this case, the platform. So in that case, things is pretty clear what is happening. So sharing with you something somebody else sent me, it doesn't break encryption, but you are allowed to see the content. That happened in user report. In the case of metadata analysis, what WhatsApp does is they scan some surface and the platform who are not encrypted. What is encrypted is the message user exchange. Any content, picture, video, text, audio, we share in the platform, that is encrypted. But there are things like the icon, the avatar of the person, the bio, the description or the bio of the user, or the description and the group in a private or public group in which a person is interacting. That is not encrypted. That is available for the platform to see. So what they are doing is looking to those non-encrypted sides of the platform, that surface in which they are not encrypted, to look for clues. And there's something is, in some cases, for instance, a terrorist group where we had a slogan advertising their views, and that is available to platform. So in case for child sexual abuse material, maybe some clues they are working with some like dictionary database of terms are associated with that kind of content. And when those contents are flagged, then somebody can look to see where that picture or that bio is really referring to that particular content, terrorist, child sexual abuse, or any other unwanted content. So that's the way it works. That's when something is, and in that case, they may look for other places in which that content may have been shared and had a better way to make a decision. But it's kind of complicated, several stage process. But as Rihanna mentioned before, with the increasing capabilities, artificial intelligence is provided that those processes are accelerating and getting a little bit more accurate. So it's a possibility to continue to work, but also is kind of problematic because the platforms are getting more and more data to be able to do that kind of analysis from the users.
Rihanna, did you want to jump in there on the AI point?
Yeah, I think this is still something that is underway that we know, according to the terrific outside looking in paper from CDT that Dhanaraj was a co-author on, and maybe he could speak a little more to this. I know that there's been some research or findings that Meta has been employing some AI on the, what we would call the back end, I guess, to do processing over user reports or over metadata to try and find abusive accounts. WhatsApp, for example, if memory serves, has a way of looking at the kinds of non-encrypted metadata that that particular app collects to try and identify patterns or trends that would point towards abusive accounts or abusive groups of accounts. Because we have to bear in mind that things like the name of a group or the name of a user or the avatar for an individual or for a group, those things are not end-to-end encrypted, and so they could still be visible to the platform, even if all of the contents of all the messages exchanged between users or within a group are encrypted.
A question for any panelists. It seems like Rihanna's work is pointing toward user reporting as a perhaps the most effective method for most kinds of unwanted content for moderating in an encrypted environment. What do providers do to make user reporting easier, more valuable, more likely to be engaged in to help them do this content moderating?
Could maybe I know the others may have other ideas on this, but I could start going back to this recent report, Greg, that I mentioned based on teenagers and their perspectives on user reporting. And I think what's important to appreciate here is that we often think of content detection as a first step, right? So there's some problematic content, someone reports it, but that's just the first step. Is what happens afterwards that a lot of the young people that we spoke to are want to have better information on and more transparency on. So what happens after the report is filed? What are the next steps? What are the enforcement mechanisms, appeals mechanism, and so on? And I think that's important because we have to recognize that content moderation is not just detection. And so for the platforms to provide more transparency of those follow-up steps, I think would make the whole user reporting process more effective.
I would like to add, in that particular problem, platforms should be doing some adjustments in the product design, but and also in their workflows. So some of the things we recommend at the end of our report is try to make reporting features more visible in the main screen on the app, and so that make people see easily, don't need to look for it, and in a display the menu display, so it's there, and it's easy to find. That is simple, that design issue can be done. Also, one recommendation we had for groups is kind of reminders of that is as an option. You can report content in the group who is not allowed. You are not looking for is unwanted content. That should be a possibility too, to have that kind of content. Some of that thing can be done in collaboration with group admins. So group admins have the ability to send reminders to the groups about when some content is unwanted and is circulating in a group, to make that more salient, that the possibility that is there, and had clear definitions on how those reports are handled. Some people are kind of shy, afraid of reporting because they don't know what's happening. Some people say the other person knows, it was me who reported. What happened after I reported something? So that should be clear for the user. It's in the policies. Is most of the platform write those on the policy, but those are very long documents nobody read. So it should be more accessible to the people. What is the workflow? What is the consequences of a report for both the reporting person and the person who is reported? That will help. in the case of teenage, I guess the project will find that digital literacy in middle school will be a long way for increasing safety in these platforms as they continue to be more popular.
So we're at 3 minutes before time, and so I'm going to play the evil but smiling timekeeper. There's been a couple questions in the chat about the WhatsApp GP or whatever it was called that was not really provided by Meta and is not in the Google Play Store. Why does that exist? And can WhatsApp do anything about it, or anyone else do something about it, so that people aren't using something that's probably not encrypted end to end and might be a little less safe?
Yeah, so yeah, what WhatsApp does is if they find that you are using this unofficial platform, they block you, or they may ban you from using WhatsApp for a certain period of time. But however, it seems that it's not being effective because like a lot of people they use WhatsApp GP because it has some features which the authentic WhatsApp doesn't have. Like some they say that it's a spying platform, like you can view people's status without them knowing and so forth. Yeah. So, but WhatsApp is trying by all means to block all those who have used this unofficial platform. But however, it seems that it's not enough what they are doing here.
Appreciate it. We've got 1 minute left. I want to invite each panelist to make a closing comment, perhaps in response to something someone else said or something that they just have to get in before this event ends. Let's start with Iria.
Well, I think something I would like to convey is these issues of encryption need to consider the technical side, the policy side, and the user needs. So we can, that's what I was trying to address at the beginning. We can't have legal solutions or technological solutions so we don't understand how how users are interacting with those limits of the platform. So I think it's an important point to try to get what there are the trace of from the user point of view, what the user is trying to accomplish, and that will center encryption, because most of the time we are looking for security, we are looking for having our data protected, and we are looking for privacy, particularly in contexts in which we live in repressive authoritarian countries. That is a very clear need for people from those countries as myself.
Iria, you got the last word in. Congratulations. I'm sorry I won't be able to get to the other panelists because I do have to be the evil but smiling timekeeper. Thank you everyone for joining, and take a break, but come back to us for the next panel of Global Encryption Day. And remember, Global Encryption Day is every year on October 21st. Please continue to join us. And if you are in an organization, haven't yet done it, please join the Global Encryption Coalition. And you can find us online. And again, thank you for coming, and bye for now.